All right, welcome to Stocks and Sauces. So here, this lecture is on stocks, and I love a homemade stock. A stock is is pretty much your basis of, it's your foundation of your sauces, okay? Because without it, you can't make a creamy chicken sauce. You can't make a veal sauce, which would be your demi-glace or your espagnole. So you guys are going to start hearing words that you've probably never heard before, okay? And we will go from there, all right? But you got to start learning them, all right? So when you start looking at stocks, okay? So a stock is a basic. It's a basic liquid that is used in the kitchen. We use it for soups, sauces, to make rice, to make potatoes. I mean, you can use stocks for anything. And there's three types of stocks. There's a white stock, a brown stock, and a fumet. And a fumet is a fish fumet. It's made out of white bones. Usually it's a lean fish that you're going to use, a white lean fish. So anyways, so it's a French term which means fond, okay? So a fond is your foundation of the cooking. And think about it as it is the basis. It's what everything sits on a good stock, okay? So a stock is made from bones, all right? So here I can get chicken bones. So a white stock is, you take your chicken bones and you put mirepoix with it. So mirepoix is, I'm always getting ahead of myself. Hold on, I'll get there in a second. So stocks are a flavorful liquid from gently simmering meaty bones, trim, or vegetables in a liquid to extract the flavor, aroma, color, body, and nutritive value. All right, so when you think about this, you're taking these bones and you're simmering them with your mirepoix. And your mirepoix is an aromatic vegetable. So it's carrots, celery, and onion, okay? So your percentage, so it's 50% onion, 25% celery, and 25% carrot. So think about if I'm doing, it doesn't matter if I'm doing a 2-gallon pot or a 50-gallon pot. Usually when I make stocks, I use 150 pounds of bones, okay? So if it's 150 pounds of bones, it's all a ratio game. You know what? If I put one too many onion, is it going to change it? No, it's not. If I put two less, is it going to change it? No. So it really is a ratio game. And if you can get this ratio, you will be good. So the ratio is this. So it's, if you take a pot, so let's say here's my Yeti cup, right? So I have my Yeti cup, and it doesn't matter if this is a big gallon pot, a 50-gallon pot, or 1-gallon pot, whatever you want, right? So it's 50% bones. So whatever my pot is, I'm going to fill it to 50% with my bones, right? And then 10% mirepoix. So if I use 5% bones, right? So 5%, so I'm using 5 pounds of bones. So 10% is going to be what? 5 ounces of mirepoix? You know what I mean? So I'm doing 50% bones, 10% mirepoix, all right? And then the rest is going to be liquid. It's going to be water, all right? And you just fill it up. Usually I fill it a little bit past my bones and my mirepoix so that it will have time to simmer, all right? And you add a sachet, and we'll get to talk about what a sachet is. All right, but you take these ingredients, you put them together with cold liquid, and you let it cook. And it all depends on how flavorful you want it to be. So if you're doing a white stock is made from chicken bones, 100% of the time. But it's a technique. You got to get it. The white stock, it's a technique, okay? And so all you're doing is you're just literally putting it all in a pot, pouring cold water on it, and then letting it cook. So a white stock is going to cook for 3 to 6 hours. A brown stock is going to cook anywhere between 12 to 24 hours. It needs to cook overnight. All right. But when you're looking at your stocks, as I said, they're the key ingredient. If I'm going to braise my chicken, right, and I'm going to make a chicken dish and I'm going to braise it, let's say I do chicken fricassee. Chicken fricassee is taking an onion, it's sweating the onion, it's taking my 8-cut chicken, it's searing it, getting no color, sweating the onion, putting it in a container, and adding some flour to my fat to make a roux, and then I add my chicken stock and my sachet. I pour it over my chicken, I put it in a container, I wrap it in aluminum foil, and I cook it in the oven. And I'll cook it in the oven for about 2 hours, and my chicken will be fork tender. All right, so you take that, and then that liquid, you strain it off, and that becomes your sauce, and you reduce it down, and then you add a little cream, add a little lemon, salt and pepper, and boom, I have a chicken fricassee. All right, and that's what it is. You're using stock. Stock is your base. All right, if you're cooking grains, I'm using stock. So white stock, you have 3 stocks: a white stock, a brown stock, and a fish stock. Okay, and a fish stock, you usually call it a fish fumet. So you can see you have your stocks, okay, and they're all techniques. They all are different techniques. So I told you the white stock is you add if you look at that picture in the left corner of your screen, when you're looking at your PowerPoint, you'll see that you have the chicken, you have the mirepoix, okay, and you have your sachet. The sachet is in the cheesecloth. So a sachet, it's an aromatic of herbs. So it's parsley stems, whole black peppercorn, because if you use cracked pepper, it will make it bitter. Parsley stems, whole black peppercorn, thyme sprig or dried, and bay leaf. Okay, and that is your basis, and you tie it in a cheesecloth and you throw it in there, and that's just going to give you some aromatic. Okay, it's just giving you a little flavor. Am I going to taste thyme? No, but you'll taste it all in there. It's nothing that's a prevalent flavor, if you will. And you're going to use your mirepoix. Sorry, your mirepoix is onion, celery, carrots. So, and you're going to use this from here on out. Welcome to mirepoix. So it's onion, celery, carrots, 50% onion, 25% celery, 25% carrot. Doesn't matter how much I need. If I'm doing it for a large batch or a small batch, I'm looking at my portion size and I'm cutting it. 50% is going to be onion and the other 25 of carrot, and I'm looking at a ratio. Okay, and that's what you do. It's all ratios. All right, so white stocks are made by combining all the ingredients with a cool liquid and gently simmering over heat. So you're going to simmer it for a good 3.5 to 6 hours. And you know, think about it. Grandma used to have a pot. They would throw a whole chicken in it. They'd put some mirepoix in there, a sachet. You'd see bay leaf, black peppercorn, some thyme just sitting around. They didn't put it in the cheesecloth. They were making a stock, and then they pull out the chicken and they pick off the chicken and make chicken salad, chicken and dumplings. You have that liquid. You make homemade chicken noodle soup with it. You're cooking it for the liquid. All right. For us, I'm not going to put whole chickens, 150 pounds of whole chickens. Do you know how much time I got to pick through this? So the bones don't cost much. For a case of bones, I can get them for about $25-$30 for my chicken bones. Now my veal bones, they cost me $150. They cost me about $150 a case for a 50-pound case of bones, which is crazy, but yeah, it is. But they're so good. All right, so white stock is your chicken stock, okay? And it has no color to it. So there's no browning, there's nothing to it. So the only place that it can get color, because think about it, it's going to have kind of an orange hue, is from your keratin in the carrot. All right, so that's where it will get a little orange hue. If you want it to be more white, the French, what they do is they use less carrot and they'll use some parsnip, because a parsnip can have a little bit of sweet flavor to it too. Okay, so a brown stock is made by caramelizing the bones. So here I take veal bones, and they're knuckle bones, and they're about this big. They're huge, and I put them on a sheet tray and I brown them in the oven. So I turn my oven to 450 degrees. and I throw them in the oven for at least 45 minutes to an hour. And I want to roast them. I want to brown them. I want to get really brown color. I want to get to almost burnt, okay? But don't get to burnt, because then it's a whole different horrible flavor. But you want to get it really, really brown and roasted, all right? And then you pull that out and you rub them with tomato paste and you put it back in the oven for about 5 minutes, because you're just kind of caramelizing your tomato. And you put that in your pot. And then you have your mirepoix, which is your onions, carrots, celery, and you put those on a sheet tray and brown them too, all right? And so here we want this to be a brown stock. We want the color to be brown, and you're getting that richness from the tomato, okay? And you put it in the pot, and you put your bones with the tomato paste, you put your brown mirepoix, you put your sachet in there, you fill it with cold water, and you let it cook overnight, okay? And I would, in my steam jacketed kettle, I would literally put it in during the day, and I would let it cook for 24 hours. And then I'd strain it off, and then I would have, I'd fill it back up, and with my brown stock, I'd make a remoulage. And a remoulage, it's R-E-M-O-U-I-L-L-A-G-E. And it means second rinse, okay? So you're just kind of doing a second run. And because these bones are so big, I'm doing a second run. It's not gonna be as strong as flavor, but it's good. You can use it, to braise with. You can use it to cook some grains, or to make some soup, kind of a base for your soup. Where you're using that brown stock for your sauces. All right, so here, I love a brown stock. And a lot of people don't make them homemade anymore. A lot of restaurants don't. They'll use a base. They'll use chicken base or a beef broth. And it's because it's cheaper. And it's a lot less time consuming. But to me, I can go out to dinner, and I promise you, my friends all know this about me. I go out to dinner, and the plate comes, and boop, and I put my fork or spoon, and I taste their sauce. And I can tell you immediately, is it a base or is it homemade? And if it's homemade, I get really, really excited, and I know that I'm going to have a great meal. If my sauce is kind of, then my meal's probably going to be, because it's all about the sauce, in my opinion. All about the sauce. So stocks are everything, but stocks are your base. When you look at your fish stock, here, the fumet, they're just sweating the bones. They're sweating the mirepoix, and they're sweating the bones. Now, the difference with the fumet between your mirepoix in your white and brown stock and fumet is that the fumet is not using carrots. Usually you're going to use mushrooms and leeks. Because you want a lighter flavor. You don't want it to be strong. It's a light fish stock. It's not very strong, but it's very nice. It's a very aromatic fish stock that is great to poach your fish in and to make soups with. So it really is good. You'll use this when you make clam chowder. You'll also, the difference between a stock, you look at a stock, they're the same. The fish fumet and stock, they're very similar. A fish stock wouldn't have the white wine in it, where the fumet does. The fumet is a lot lighter, and it's beautiful. I love using a fumet. But you also have a shellfish stock. So a shellfish stock, think of making shrimp stock for a shrimp bisque or lobster stock. Those are great for making your bisques and seafood soups and chowders and stuff like that. So, and again, you need to decide, are you a homemade person or not? I'll tell you this, when I went to culinary school and I did the homemade, I've never gone back. You cannot get me to use a base. I want a homemade stock. And that's what I cook with at home and at school, and in all my hotels. My hotels, I had big tilt skillets and big steam jacketed kettles. And again, I would use 3 cases of veal bones. So think about it, it was 150 cases, $150 for each 50 pounds. So it'd be almost a $500 kettle of bones that I use to make sauces from. But you know what? It's worth it to me. And that's what I did in my hotels. I always made stocks because if you have a kettle and you don't, you're stupid. I'm just saying, you're stupid, you know. But a lot of people, you know what? They use base. Base is cheap, you know. Think of a bouillon cube. It's the same thing. A quart bouillon is not actually a stock, but it's prepared much in the same way. It's more of a French for a short broth. It's very flavorful liquid, usually water, wine, or vinegar. There's some sort of acid in it. And usually you have your vegetables and you simmer it to get the flavors and the aromas. The aromatics in there, usually I will poach if I do a poached salmon, I'm going to poach it in a quart bouillon. And the quart bouillon, it has the acid. It's having a stock, think about it, it's a vegetable stock with an acid. So, you know, you can, and I add herbs and citrus, you know, you can make it very, very flavorful. And those flavors will go into your piece of fish, or, you know, you can poach chicken, you know, a chicken breast if you want. If you're going to poach anything, you got to poach it a lean, tender cut. So you're not going to poach anything that's a tough cut of meat. Quart bouillons are most commonly used to poach foods. I just talked about that. So in a stock, so when you're looking at stocks, again, you're going to rinse your bones, especially my chicken bones. I want to rinse off that blood because the blood can be, it can color your stock. But the thing that I need you to understand is the impurities. So the blood is the impurities, and it will rise to the top. So there's a couple of things that I'll explain to you. So when you're looking at your stock, you're adding everything in. You're adding your bones, your mirepoix, your sachet, and you're covering it with cold water. And there's a few reasons why we cover it with the cold water. Is because we want everything to come to temperature at the same time. And as it comes to temperature at the same time, what happens is your impurities will rise to the top. So have you ever boiled something and you see kind of this gray or white foam that's on top? That's impurities. That's the impurities rising to the top. And you can just skim those off. You can skim them off. It's called depellage, okay, where you skim it off using a ladle. And again, it's, you know, you let it cook and you don't boil it, okay? So there's some don'ts you don't do with the stock. One, you don't boil it. You never let it boil, because if you do, the impurities get rapidly boiling and it gets mixed in and it clouds your stock. Two, you never use hot water. You always use cold water because you want it to all come together at the same time with the heat. You never season it, okay? And what I mean by season it, you never use salt because remember, it's a base. So if I add salt now to something and then I take it and I reduce it, that salt's going to come out more, right? And then it will be really, really salty. So you never season it with salt. Never season it with salt, and you never stir. Why don't I stir? Same reason I don't boil. I don't want it to mix together. It will cloud my stock. All right. So those are some don'ts that you don't want to do. Here you're looking at so the cartilage and the connective tissue, especially when you're looking at a brown stock, you're going to see that more because there's going to be some gelatin. When it cools down, the collagen, it will melt. It's the gelatin, okay? It will melt, and in your stock, when it cools down, you've strained it, you've done everything with it, all of a sudden the next day when you come, you'll see it will have some gelatin. It will have some viscosity, if you will. It's a little thick. It's not thick, but you're going to see when it's cold, it looks kind of jello-y. And that's what you want. That's the collagen. That's the protein that's found in the connective tissue. Okay? And you can't taste it, but you get that from your bones. And again, so your standard mirepoix is your carrots, onions, celery, and you see the 50% onion, 25. And again, it's a ratio game. It's the ratio game. So you have your mirepoix, you have your maintenant. Your maintenant it's a mirepoix that has lardon in it, bacon. So you cut up the bacon. So I cut up my bacon, and then I go to cook it, okay? And I put it in a pan, and think about it. We don't put any oil in it because bacon, once it starts to cook, the fat melts, right? It renders. So anytime you want to render fat, you're melting fat. Think of bacon, you're rendering. You put it in a pot, doesn't have any fat in it, and all of a sudden you come back 2 seconds later, and as it's heated, the fat has melted. So that's what's rendering. So you render the bacon, and then you add your mirepoix in there, and you cook it in that fat, all right? And then you put it in the oven and cook it until it's done. And that's a matinee. And you can serve it as a side dish, or as a or in a dish. So it's really beautiful. All right, so you have your basics, your whole black peppercorns, your bay leaf, your thyme, your parsley stems, and garlic. Now, some chefs will use garlic, some chefs won't. I will tell you now, classically trained chefs, they'll use garlic and cloves. Now, I don't. Every chef that I know that went to Johnson & Wales, none of us use cloves. And it's because we don't, if you put too many, you're gonna have that clove flavor and you've ruined the stock. So I never have garlic. And think about this, you don't wanna use, like, I'm not using, in my stocks, I'm not using rosemary. I'm not using strong flavors because I'm gonna use it across the board for all kinds of different things. So if I wanna add a strong flavor, if I wanna do a rosemary lemon creamy chicken sauce, I'm gonna have my chicken stock, and then I can add the herbs into it. I can add that lemon, I can add that rosemary to get those flavors. But if my whole kettle tastes like rosemary, then everything tastes like rosemary. So you gotta be careful, and that's why you're using these, they're kind of basic herbs, but they're not real flavorful, and they're not real, I don't wanna say they're not flavorful, they're not strong, okay? They're a lighter herb, if you will. So I talked about don't use salt in stocks, right? And then cold water, gentle simmer, skim and strain and cool. Now, when you go to cool this, the one thing you want to cool it quickly. Remember, serve safe. How many hours do we have to get it from 135 degrees to 41? Do you remember? I have 4 hours. No, 6. I screwed it up. 6. I got 2 hours to get it from 125 to 70 and 4 hours to get it from 70 to 41. All right? So remember, you got to get these down. So, and if it's 40 gallons, don't put a lid on it. If you put a lid on it, I promise you, you'll come in the next day and it will still be warm. Why? Because I've seen it happen. I've come in and a chef has put a lid on it and it's still warm. And I got to boil it again to get the bacteria. So you got to be careful. I always want to cool it as quickly as I can. And then you always got to properly store. Now, the beautiful thing with stocks is I can freeze them. Like, I make a lot of stock and I'll freeze it. And you'll see when you guys get here, you'll see all kinds of frozen stock around here. We cry back. I taught everybody how to cry back around here. You want to degrease, you want to remove that fat. So see, if you're looking at this picture, you see that what happens is you have your stock and then you let it cool, and the fat will rise to the top and you'll just have that fat. Now, the chicken one, I've used it in my roux. A roux is a fat and flour. It's fat and flour by weight that is cooked, and so it's a thickening agent, right? And think about it, chicken fat. It's a flavored fat. Why can't I use that? I use canola oil. I use olive oil. I can use chicken fat. So I've used that before. But you want to take that off whenever your stock, you want your stocks to be clear and fat-free. All right. But you can also see the gelatin in there. All right. There's a little, and that's from the collagen and the cartilage. Okay. And it's just a little bit gelatinized, which is nice. So white stock, it's a neutral stock. Then you have the beef or the chicken. Now, the one thing I'll tell you, can I make a white veal stock? Yes. So I can take those same veal bones that I make a brown veal stock, and now I can do a white veal stock. And all I'm doing, it's the same technique. So the brown stock is browning your bones and browning your mirepoix. The white stock is Everything is raw, goes into a pot, your bones, your mirepoix, your sachet, and add cold water, and you cook and simmer. All right? It's all the same thing, but one's brown and one's white. So I can make a brown chicken stock. I can brown my bones, brown my mirepoix, add tomato paste onto my chicken bones, and do the same technique and have a brown chicken stock. I can have a white veal stock. So it's a technique, and that's what I need you to understand. Fumet, it's a technique. White stock, it's a technique. Brown stock, it's a technique. And once you start to understand techniques, you can make anything. Now I can go and if let's say I just had a bunch of ducks, I can do a brown duck sauce. Very nice, it'd be great. I can do a brown rabbit sauce. Stock. I can do a white rabbit stock. If I have a rabbit, if I have rabbit on my menu. So that's what I want you to kind of think about, okay? But they're techniques: white stock, brown stock, fish fumet, and it's just understanding them. Deglazing the pan is usually, you see here water. I always use wine. I always use an acid to deglaze my pan. And the other, it takes that fond off, that sooks, where it sticks. Okay, now if it's a burnt pan, you can't deglaze it because you're just going to take that burnt and pour it into your stock or your sauce. So you got to be careful with that. But you're going to see you'll learn how to deglaze pans. And deglazing is great because it kind of will reduce your alcohol, which your wine, or I can deglaze with some bourbon if I wanted to, or a vinegar. So I can deglaze whatever, but it will concentrate on you, and it's just adding it in. All right, I told you a remoulage is a stock used from bones, but it's a second run, okay? So a remoulage is a second run. I strain off my stock, and then I fill it up with cold water again, and I do a second run on it. And it's not going to be very flavorful. Then you have your fumet. We talked about the fumet, strong in flavor. You're going to have your acid. And again, you're just sweating your mirepoix, sweating your bones, and then adding your water and, adding your white wine. I always add white wine. And then you have a vegetable stock. A vegetable stock, you know what? Tomatoes, mirepoix. So tomatoes, mirepoix, mushrooms, parsnips, leeks. I can add whatever I want to into that. Let's say I want to kind of steer it. I can. But great vegetable stocks. You gotta love them, especially for any vegan cooking. You don't want to have any meat, right? So. They're always nice, but without having any bones, you're not going to have any gelatin. It's just going to be a clear liquid, which is fine. Talked about a court bouillon. So a nage is an aromatic court bouillon served as a sauce. So you can take that court bouillon, and as you poach things in it, you can take that liquid and reduce it down and thicken it up, and now you have a nage, which would be a sauce, okay? And add more aromatics to it if you wanted. A glace is a reduced stock that's reduced by 3/4, okay? So you take a stock, if I take a gallon of stock and I reduce it by 3/4, so that would be, I would reduce it to a quart, okay? So I'm taking a gallon and reducing it to a quart, and it would be gelatinous, and it would be very strong and concentrated because you're cooking out that water. As the one thing you need to understand with the stock, as it reduces down, your water evaporates and your flavors concentrate, all right? And that is incredible. And that's how you make a good sauce, all right? Because your stocks, some of them will be weak and some of them will be strong. It all depends on how many bones and how much water you add. And sometimes, you know what, somebody adds too much water to the stock. So it's just kind of understanding that and knowing that, you know what, I can sit there and I can reduce it. I can boil this down where I evaporate my water and my flavors concentrate. And that's how you make good sauces, okay? So that is your stocks, okay? You guys, when you guys get back to campus, you guys will make stocks when you're in knife skills, because you got to start making them. It takes a couple of days to get the stocks made. But you know what? I love good stocks, and you will too. All right, talk to you later. Bye.